So you're thinking of going to Eastern Europe? Well, I've got some good news for you. You're going to love it. And I've got some more good news. You've come to the right place for tips to know before you backpack there. Now, I've been to every single country in Eastern Europe now, apart from one, which is Bulgaria. So I'm in the position to tell you things I wish I knew before I went. And this ranges from accommodation to transport to money issues. So stay to the end. And these are the things I wish I knew before backpacking Eastern Europe. Firstly, buses are going to be your biggest friend in Eastern Europe. So you're going to want to download Flixbus and GetByBus. Flixbus is probably the best and cheapest buses across Europe as a whole, but sometimes they don't operate between different cities. Therefore, you can check GetByBus, which is a website which pretty much guarantees you to get between two different cities. It's definitely reliable. I've used them probably about 100 times and never had an issue. And they also show you the cheapest times to go and also a range of different options that you have. So you've booked your bus ticket in advance on GetByBus or Flixbus and you arrive at the bus station. Well, you're going to need some local change, and that's because quite often they charge something called a platform fee. So to actually get onto the bus platform, there'll be a little desk next to the entrance, and that you'll need to pay maybe €2 maximum, whatever that is in the local currency, to use the platform. So don't get caught out by this. Don't spend everything you've got of the local currency. Have a little bit of change to pay for that platform fee so you don't have to go rushing off to the ATM. So you've paid your platform fee and you're showing your ticket to the bus driver, either on Flixbus or GetByBus. If you've got some baggage with you that you don't want to take on the bus, they might charge you to put it underneath. This is less for Flixbus and more so for GetByBus buses. So again, make sure you've just got some local change. Another thing to bear in mind is that the borders are usually completely fine. And this is mainly going between non-EU countries. If you are going into the EU, expect a little bit of a delay. It does take longer to get, for example, from Bosnia into Croatia. But if you're going from North Macedonia to Albania, there are pretty much no issues. And it's rare they even ask you to get out of your car or the bus to even check your identity. And the final thing to note about transportation in Eastern Europe is that you can't expect to find Uber and Bolt everywhere. Sometimes these taxi hailing apps don't work, and it's in quite a lot of the Balkan countries. So you're going to want to use the official taxis instead. Shock horror, you've got to use a local taxi. How do you distinguish? How do you know you're not getting ripped off? Well, I'd advise you just to search in advance how much it should cost, and only to take the official taxis. How do you know which ones the official taxis are? Again, just do a bit of research before. For North Macedonia, the official taxis are the ones with the yellow number plate. I took one accidentally that didn't have a yellow number plate and it charged me double. Next, let's talk about money. And a lot of the Eastern European countries actually have their own currencies, from Poland to Romania to North Macedonia. And what does that mean? Well, that means you're going to be taking money out quite a bit at the ATMs, which is a pain because they are quite expensive. Particularly in Albania, we thought it was up to about £7 to get cash out. So for example, again, using North Macedonia, the green ATMs are free. So I'll leave a link to a Google Map location for a free ATM location in Ohrid as an example. For the good times when you can use card, make sure you're using a bank which doesn't charge transaction fees for converting it back into pounds. And this can be seen in Chase, Starling and Monzo up to a limit as well. And when you are at an ATM taking cash out, make sure you take cash out in the local currency so you don't use the bank's conversion rate. Same with any card machine, make sure you're using the local currency rate and let your bank do the conversion. So what time of year should you go to Eastern Europe? And I think the perfect time is the shoulder seasons, so September, May, June. And this is because you can still see the best of, say, the Albanian Alps, which get too snowy in the winter time. And you still get the warm weather, however it's less crowded. You've got to be careful though when you go to some tourist destinations, for example the Plitvice Lakes, who get super busy on the narrow walkways in Croatia in July and August, and the price can also differ a fair bit. I've put a map on screen now of the different budgets in peak season and off season, so you can kind of compare. In some countries it's not that much of a price difference, however in others, for example Croatia and Montenegro, it really can be. So where should you actually go in Eastern Europe? Now, you've got to respect that Eastern Europe is actually quite a large area. So even if you've got a couple of weeks, you can't see everywhere. And so I'd recommend taking it slowly and actually getting to know each place rather than getting long bus journeys from A to B to C, because it's not worth it and it will tire you out and you won't enjoy Eastern Europe for what it is. Instead, take a slower approach. So I recommend getting out into the countryside and avoid just spending time in the capital cities. The best part about Eastern Europe and the Balkans for me is the nature, and that is usually outside of the cities. So even if it's on a day trip or you're doing an overnight tour through Wanderers Hostel in the Albanian Alps, for example, it's thoroughly worth just getting out of the city. If you want an example of an actual itinerary, I'll put one on the screen now of one that we did that I enjoyed the most, which involved flying into Bucharest in Romania, then getting an overnight bus to Chisinau in Moldova. This bit can be skipped out, and then back over to Brasov in Romania. If you don't want to go to Moldova, you can just easily go from Bucharest to Brasov. Brasov is the centre of hiking in Romania. You can see Transylvania and Dracula's castle. Then get the overnight train. Make sure you go in second class. We went in third class and it was a horrendous experience. It's an overnight train, which is unusual for the Balkans, from Brasov to Budapest. And then we went from Budapest to Bratislava. We really enjoyed that trip. It gives you a sense of the less touristy Eastern Europe in Moldova, whilst also allowing you to see the popular Eastern European city of Budapest and Bratislava. So I'd really recommend that route, and that will probably take you about 2.5 weeks. So that's the kind of speed you should be looking at. So finally, let's talk about some negatives, because generally I've been pretty positive about Eastern Europe and the Balkan region so far. The first one, you can't really use card anywhere, which is such a pain and means you've got to pay these high ATM fees. So that means you've got to be prepared and organised, and that is probably one of the things you've got to be aware of. Also, make sure you're aware of any regional issues, for example, the Serbia-Kosovo conflict. Make sure you don't just go up to locals and ask them about it. It's fine to have questions, just make sure you're asking tour guides or people in hostels that maybe have a bit more experience answering these questions fairly. If you are going from Serbia to Kosovo, which is probably worth mentioning in this section, you can go from Serbia to Kosovo over the border, but it can't be vice versa. So if you enter Serbia through the Kosovo border, you won't have a Serbia entry stamp. So you'll get into all sorts of difficulty from what I've heard anyway. So make sure if you are going from Kosovo to Serbia, go via a third country, whether that be North Macedonia or Montenegro or Albania. So make sure you're aware of that. Smoking indoors is also common, so if smoking's not your thing, then make sure you go to bars that don't allow it or sit outside, but it's something to be aware of when you go into a bar and the smoke clings to you. It's not particularly pleasant, especially if you come from a country where people don't really smoke. And also eSIMs. Now make sure you do get your eSIMs. From the UK, a lot of the Eastern European countries aren't included in the data packages, which means you can be spending quite a lot of money and it racks up for data. So make sure you go to the local eSIM shop, or you download an eSIM through an app. And finally, which type of bag do you bring? Well, surprisingly, in Eastern Europe, all the streets are pretty much cobbled, which absolutely wrecks your suitcase. So for this, bring a backpack. So those were all the things I wish I knew before I visited every single Eastern European and Balkan country. Generally very positive experience, and I thoroughly recommend you go instead of paying the high prices in the Western European world. Much more affordable, the people are friendly, the food's great, and you will have a great time. If you want any more advice on anything to do with Eastern Europe and the Balkans, visit my TikTok, or there's a playlist here where you can get even more information and more things I wish I knew before visiting each individual country, such as Albania. And I'll see you next week.